In Chapter 2, we dig into the soil to understand factors that affect soil quality. Let's start with a phenomenon. The tallest trees on Earth are coast redwoods, but in one forest along the California coast, redwood trees never grow higher than about 20 feet tall, even though they're quite old. They call it a pygmy forest, and it's the exact same species, but the redwood trees look quite different in different regions of the pygmy forest, and never as tall as the typical redwood tree. The soil looks different in each region, and since the locations are so close together and experience almost identical climate conditions, those soil differences must be the cause. But what about the soil is so different? That's our mystery for this chapter. In Lesson 5, we introduce the phenomenon and have a brief discussion of soil quality. One way to tell soils apart is to expose them to hydrogen peroxide. Some soils fizz and others do not. Have students compare their soils visually and then test how the fizzing differs. Pour just enough soil to cover the bottom of the cup, maybe a centimeter thick. Then add just enough hydrogen peroxide to saturate the soil without getting it too wet. Start a timer and then watch how long each sample takes to fizz. During the analysis, students should notice the pattern that darker, richer soils with more organic matter fizz more than sandy soils. Students discuss why that might be and which soil could be better for plants. In the next lesson, we again check on, care for, and track data for our worm farms, and share out what we've learned about soil quality so far. Next, students are going to be researching factors that affect soil quality, specifically bad soil. They start with a set of websites from Green Ninja and then branch out to find more resources on their own. And finally, students start to compile a master class list of bad soil factors that we'll finish up next lesson. In the next lesson, students finish the class bad soil list. Then we're reminded of the phenomenon for the chapter that these redwood trees grew different heights in different soils. They read about several ways that the soil can vary, and now it's time to design experiments to determine if the factors from the class list actually do affect plant growth. Students will work in teams and receive the bad soil investigation handout for instructions, and they have the remainder of the class period to plan out their investigation. It's worth emphasizing some general rules for planning investigations. When we're making a comparison investigation experiment like we are, it's really important that we are clear on what specific scientific question we want to answer. Like, how much does soil pH affect plant growth? We want to train our students to formulate their question and then ask themselves as they plan, will this investigation provide me enough data to answer my question? The investigation should also use appropriate tools. Most scientific observations come from measurements, and we want to make sure our measurements are accurate and consistent. This takes the right tools for measurement and the right tools for the setup. Lastly, we want to ensure a fair test. If we're comparing a change in one aspect of a soil's property, we want to make sure that everything else stays the same. That means keeping everything constant except that single variable we're interested in, and making sure that we have a consistent and fair basis for comparison. In the next lesson, we focus in on what is our basis for comparison. We spend time determining the controls for the investigation. Students review the bad soil investigation handout steps to make sure that they've designed a robust experiment. With the chief scientist's approval, that's you, the teacher, they go ahead and set up their experiments. And finally, students end the class checking on and caring for and tracking data for their worms. Next up, while we're waiting for changes in the soil to cause changes in our plants, we'll see how soil forms the foundation for our entire ecosystem.